wondering, how do we find the right story? So how can we find the right story to the group that we're teaching? There's one very important question we need to ask ourselves, whether you're leading a Bible study, writing a Bible lesson, or whether you're preparing your devotions or preaching, whatever it is, you give a lesson. Before you even start your lesson, you have to ask this question: who are your audiences? Who are your audiences? This is such a powerful, important question that we need to ask ourselves. We call this audience analysis. Audience analysis. We have to analyze who our audience before we even plan anything to feed them spiritually. Because without that understanding, what you're going to teach will be irrelevant. So here are a few things that we need to bear in mind: finding the right story for your people, knowing your target markets and target groups and study them is very important. What are some of the needs and struggles and challenges? One of the areas that I want to communicate, to share with you, especially under needs, is we have felt needs and heart needs. Felt needs is something that is on the surface, and it's a kind of a service needs, like needs that is very obvious. And heart needs is something that is deeper, that is not so obvious. Years ago, we had a student in our partner ministry program, and she always have some physical problem, pain in her body. So for the longest time, she went to see doctors, trying to understand the situation, but it's still no cure. And then later on, I think she find out this physical pain is actually related to her desire wanting to go home, and her homesickness kind of leads to her physical pain. So on the surface, it seems like she has her physical pain, but under like her heart needs, which is her deepest need, is that she have a desire wanting to be with her family. She really missed her family back home. So her homesick leads to her physical pain. So we really have to ask the question. Sometimes it's not the surface needs. It's not, if someone have a needs that could be something is much deeper than what we can see. And some of the struggles that the people that struggle with, who are your audience? What are some of the challenges that they struggle with? Maybe in your community, some of the example here, that some of the people who may be outcast. So the Samaritan woman would be a good fit to tell this story about how Jesus see everyone equal in his kingdom, and he would love to share his love with people with different backgrounds. And for example, this lady, Samaritan woman, we all know that she has a very not so glamorous background. To many people in her culture, she may be seen as someone that is very outcast, with so many husbands, she's been with so many men. So that may be a good story for you to tell, especially those who feel they're outcast. Maybe your own children. For me, I gave an example. Recently, I did one exercise for my daughter, and she has the longest time she had, very fear of the dark. And I really want to pick Mark 5, where it talks about Jesus cast out the demons. And I think I want her to know that Jesus is so powerful, even than demons. So you have to really ask the question, who are your audience? What are some of the needs? Before you even move on to think about what you're going to tell them, or which stories and what Bible lessons, you have to have them in mind before you even start planning your lesson. I want you to think for a minute, if you can think for a minute, like what are some of the needs and challenges of the people that you've been ministering to? So let's pause and think for a minute. What are some of the needs and struggles that they are going through right now? This is such an important questions before you can even think and find out. And I want to probably ask you, how can we find out about their needs? A few things that is important, that we can talk to them, listen to them, or interview them. And most importantly, spend time with them outside of classroom, just listening and understanding some of their needs. And it's one important way for us. If we want to be a better teacher, better facilitator, better group leaders in a group, we really have to know what our people are going through. in order to really craft out messages or lessons that really cater to their needs. Another thing we have to pay attention to is their worldviews. Whether they're fear-based, guilt-based, how to interpret lives, how do they do lives as a spiritual life after death? Asking this question is very important because you want to understand the worldview. Then you will be able to know, hey, what is it so good about this story for my audience? One example I want to share with you is one time when we were in a village in China, and they have a ritual of killing a cow as a way to atone for their family's sin. And it's quite interesting because it is a huge burden for the family because this rural places, usually people are very poor. They don't have a lot of possessions, even chicken, they might have a few. They struggle with their daily livings. So as you can see, the challenge of someone, they have to buy a cow, how expensive it is, and to kill it for the family atonement. So it was such an eye-opening experience for us to tell them, you don't need to kill a cow to pay for your sin because Jesus has already paid for your sin. And to them, this is such a great news because the financial burden is huge. And the fact that they know that, there's someone who already paid for your price, which is Jesus, the Son of God, and you don't have to do that. And maybe in Singapore, being busy is good, right? So they might, whereas Jesus see the opposite, especially in in the Martha and Mary stories about how a best choice is, we need to build an intimate relationship with him first. So understanding the worldview sometimes is great way of, using that angle to teach, whatever group that the group is struggling with. Or some of the other religion, maybe Jesus is just one of the many gods, or he's just one of the prophets. So by understanding that, we have to, how can we use stories to clarify some of the, misunderstanding or some of the truths that we want to communicate in the Bible story. Other thing is, sometimes we don't want to start from the systematic theology, especially those who never heard about the gospel. I remember it's interesting in a different village that we went in China. So what is good news, right, for them? I still remember it was kind of hard because I remember I started sharing the four spiritual laws with one of the girls there. And she was totally lost. Okay. She was totally lost because she didn't even know who Jesus is. Okay. So sometimes we assume that, this is part of, our routine would tell people the fourth spiritual law, but, in some culture, they have not even heard about Jesus. So we might not be starting from systematic theology. We really have to change our approach. So I started right away and I started talking about from Genesis, how God created this world. And instead of assuming that the fourth spiritual law people would know. So I really have to change our strategy. So starting with the Genesis first to start from the beginning, so that, people without any Christian background would understand this is the God that created the world. And, so it was an eye-opening experience for me, definitely. And we have to understand some of the barriers for people to understand and accept the gospel. Just now, I gave you an example where people coming from a non-Christian background or non-Christian culture, they have no idea when you share with them the false spiritual law. Or some of the culture where women, it's best you pick a woman's story for women audiences. Some example would be the Afghan women. They felt very worthless. The identity, I don't think it's just in this particular group. I think a lot of women in Asia also as well, they feel very worthless. So Mary's story would be a good story to share with them with that lens. And try to stay close to the text as possible, because sometimes you might be the only Bible, that they can hear. I remember I shared with you one time I heard from this story. A lady, she served as a missionary in a closed country. And for the longest time, she would go to this haircut place to talk to the hairdresser. And since it's a closed country, she cannot really share the gospel. So she would, every time she go in, she would just share one Bible story. So she would just share one Bible story with the hairdresser. And it's interestingly, over the time, over the months, it's just sharing different Bible story with this lady. And finally, this hairdresser came to know Christ. So as you can see, this is a very powerful tool to bring with you if you remember stories with you. And I also have been trying to use this method to teach my children as well when I'm driving or when we're commuting. I try to remember some of the Bible stories that I've been studying and kind of tell the story. It become a dialogue between me and my kids, a spiritual dialogue between us as we talk about this. And it's amazing how you can just pull it out from your brain without bringing your Bible and dialogue, not just with your kids, maybe people around you. I will be sharing with you this document here where it has all the different target groups, like elderly, younger people, women with different religious background. What would be the best type of stories that you can share with them? So this is a very powerful and helpful document, especially if you're preparing Bible lessons or sharing devotional messages or what kind of stories if your target audience are in in various groups. So I hope this lesson has been helpful to you by just understanding orality. It's not just for the illiterate, for the people who cannot read and write. It's also a powerful tool for us as Bible teacher that we should adopt the skills, not only to, maybe teaching in our ministry settings, but also at a home, sometimes to our kids or even strangers as a way to evangelize as well.